Okay. So in the last class, we had looked at the last phases of oogenesis, that is completion of the second meiotic division, in specifically the growth phase and the maturation phase, and how does this complete maturation happens until the fertilization process. From the first polar body and the primary oocyte, it gets divided into two more polar bodies, that is secondary polar body and the secondary oocyte, which finally divides into the ovum structure. So and of course at different stages, these oocytes, they are being like at that particular stage of the meiosis for quite long time. So that was the like quick overview of the oogenesis process, and this is like a diagram which will represent this perfectly. So primordial germ cells, again 44 plus 2 sex chromosome, then it forms oogonium, that was the epithelium layer cells, germinal epithelium layer cells, which will enlarge. One of the cell will form primary oocyte, which will subsequently undergo meiosis, forming secondary oocyte, first polar body, and then they will divide by second meiotic division, that is finally forming the ovum, which of course undergo maturation process and the secondary polar body. So that way, one final ovum, which is kind of bigger because of the unequal division of the cytoplasm, and the three polar bodies at the end. And again, if you remember, the other layers and everything of the ovum that we had seen, majorly it was this zona pellucida, then the vitelline membrane, corona radiata, these were the membranes. You can look at the diagram, and I said this was not the correct diagram, so I will delete it after few maybe today itself, because it shouldn't be there at all. Let me do it right away. Please don't draw something like that. So that's the structure of the ovum. Most important part was the side which will extrude this polar body was the animal pole, and I had given an example from, let's say, from this side. If the polar bodies, they are getting removed from the this pole of the follicle structure, then that is called as animal pole, and the opposite to animal pole will be your vegetal pole. So these are the main characteristics. This was I guess this we had not seen, but we can just quickly go over it. So the difference between the male gamete formation and the female gamete formation, the difference is being mentioned here in terms of location. Spermatogenesis totally happens in testes, while the oogenesis occurs mostly in ovaries, not completely, but mostly in ovaries, and the rest of the maturation, you remember, it happens in the fallopian tube when the sperm is getting fertilized with the ovum. So that's where it is seen mostly in the ovaries. Meiotic divisions, it causes equal division of the that is the spermatozoa cells, not spermatozoa, the spermatocyte cells, or primary and secondary spermatocyte and so on. So that's the equal division in terms of meiosis. Here it is unequal division, and we have also seen why it is unequal, because the final ovum structure has to have maximum nutrition. So it is the unequal division at both meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Germline epithelium is is involved in gamete production and is not involved in gamete production. Now, what does this germline epithelium means? Is the outermost layer of that particular sperma testis structure, that is the seminiferous tubules, that is involved in this gamete production. Here, it is not only the it is not the outermost layer of the ovary, but it is rather the one of the layer of the ovary, that is the germinal epithelium. Though their names might be the same, but the layer wise they are different. So when you go back to those description, you will find this difference as well, is not involved in this gamete production. Number of gametes produced is 4 in case of spermatogenesis. Here it is only 1, but obviously these 3 polar bodies, they are formed. It's not 2 to 3, but it is specifically 1 ovum and 3 polar bodies.
Sir,
Yes.
uh, sir, in the germline epithelium, in the oogenesis,
Hmm.
so isn't the germline epithelium the innermost layer of the ovary?
Not the innermost layer, but you remember, ovaries, they are located within certain structure. And if you compare it with the seminiferous tubules, their structure and the ovary structure, they are drastically different. Within the testis you have subunits, that is seminiferous tubules in lobules and so on. In ovaries there is the outermost layer, and within that there is a germinal epithelium. So structure wise, whole of the testis is not getting involved, but germline epithelium is getting involved. In case of ovary, actually whole of the ovary is getting involved, and not the outermost layer only, which is like the epithelium layer, but it is the inner layer. Inner layer in the sense, it is the inner germinal epithelium layer. Yeah, so that is getting involved in the gamete production.
So like by germline, so like in the oogenesis, the innermost layer of the lining of the ovary, it gives rise to primordial cells, right?
Correct.
But that is not so. Then the germline epithelium is not that layer in oogenesis.
But see again, this germline epithelium in case of male is completely differentiated after puberty. That way, if you think of oogenesis, oogenesis has already started in the like 20, what was the week, I guess 25th or so, I forgot.
42%.
Yeah,
Something.
yeah, some week, right? You remember that particular fact. I don't remember the exact week, but yeah, it starts somewhere 23 to 26 week, right? So that time the germinal epithelium is not there, but the ovary structure has just started forming, and those cells over the time they form the final gamete of the ovum. Are you getting the difference now? So that's why the line says so. It does not literally mean that in case of spermatogenesis that germline is involved, and in case of oogenesis it is not involved. It actually means that there is a quite a lot of difference in terms of the first cell which is taking part in the spermatogenesis and this first cell which takes part in the oogenesis. That is what is the actual meaning of that, those lines. Yeah, is that clear, Pratham?
So the line that you said before this, could you repeat that
So I said,
about about something related to when the girl fetus is still in the, yeah, it's still in the fetus form, something happens.
yeah. So in case of oogenesis, it starts in the fetal stage itself. It does
Yeah.
not start after puberty. So originally, if you think that when this oogenesis is started, then it is at the fetal stage where the germline epithelium has not even completely differentiated, like it is the case in case of spermatogenesis. That
Yeah.
is at the puberty, and that is what is the meaning of these points here. Yeah, so that does not literally mean that oogenesis does not happen from the germline epithelium, but it means that it is not completely differentiated germline epithelium which give rise to the oogenesis here. It has
Uh,
started already during the fetal development.
so I had one more question about this. So uh, when the baby is still in the fetus form, then the oogenesis it begins,
Hmm.
right? And it forms some cells, right? Like it forms oogonia.
Right.
So, like you said, it like around 1 or 2 million oogonia it forms,
Hmm.
and they are just there, and in the diplophase they are stopped.
Right.
So, uh, like when the girl grows up, afterwards, those same oogonia one by one they convert into ovaries, or more oogonia for like created afterwards.
Yeah, over the time they are the ones which see, like I said, though number of those particular cells may not change, but few of those cells getting converted, going through mitotic division, creating more number of cells and forming whole of the ovary structure. That does happen, right? But those oogonia cells, they may not undergo any mitosis further. And individually, let's say in one cycle, one of the oogonia has developed into these different stages of the oocyte or the ovum generation, and they individually enter into the ovulation phase, and one by one they will keep forming the ovum, and then they will go either fertilize or they will go out of female body.
So we can say that the maximum number of ovaries that can form are fixed, like around 1 million or something.
Maximum number of,
Ovaries that can be formed are fixed.
not the ovaries, you mean ovum?
Yeah, ovum, yeah.
Yeah, maximum number, it is fixed. But then if you look at the time span of a human life, right, if you count the number of let's say menstrual cycles that a woman goes through, let's for example, rough calculation we'll do now. Let's say a particular girl reaches puberty at 11, right, just for simplistic calculation.
I've taken out a calculator, sir. You can tell me.
So 11 to, let's say, even up to 60 we will calculate now, right? That is the maximum, right? So those are 50 years, correct? 50 into 12.
Yeah, that's 49 years, and I put it into 12.
Into 12.
So in 1 month there is one menstrual cycle.
One menstrual cycle, one ovule.
Okay, fine.
So imagine still the number of those cells which are being produced. It's like, I don't know, 100 or 1,000 times high.
It was syntax error. My mistake.
Sorry.
It shows syntax error.
Oh. Yeah, so I guess, but you understood what the correlation is, right? So so that way it is quite a lot in number, and like that does not affect even if those number of cells is fixed at the start itself.
Yeah, okay.
So then yeah, the number of gametes produced, we know it's 4 in spermatogenesis and only 1 in case of oogenesis, plus 3 polar bodies. Now I don't know if I have mentioned it in some of the cases. Again, these are rare cases, because these polar bodies, they are naturally exactly same in terms of genetic makeup, like your ovum, which is only one. Rarely they have also got fused with the sperm and those babies have been produced. Yeah, so it's not just that ovum can only fertilize, and the reason I am giving you here is because of the genetic makeup of those cells is exactly same like the ovum. And again, these are rare chances, and there are very specific conditions in terms of pregnancy where the polar bodies will get fused to the sperm, and that will produce either a twin or I don't know, maybe triplet or so, or just that particular individual.
So is that what fraternal twins are?
No, in general that is not how like the general concept of twin works. But this individual, whichever is formed from the polar body, will also be a twin to the normally fertilized zygote. Yeah, but that's not when we talk of twins, that is not the actual concept we talk of.
No, there are 2 types of twins, right? Fraternal twins and identical twins.
Right.
Identical is when the zygote splits into 2. So fraternal is apparently there are 2 ova and 2 separate sperm.
Correct.
And then they form 2 separate zygotes. So is it like one of these is considered the other ova?
Right. So in that case, like you said it very correctly, in that case there might be a case that 2 ova are released instead of 3 polar bodies fusing with the sperm. The other scenario would be there are 2 ova are released at a time, and both of them are getting fertilized. And the situation that I am talking about is one of the ova is getting fertilized and one of the polar body is getting fertilized. Yeah, so in this case also, where the polar body is getting fertilized, that will also form a twin. But in general scenario, when we talk of a twins, that is either identical or fraternal, that is only related to ova. We don't talk of the twins which are coming from the polar bodies. Yeah, so that is the one point I want to make. Yes.
So a maximum of 8 fraternal twins can be there.
Maximum
8 fraternal twins can be there, right?
I am not sure of the number of fraternal twins. I feel they can be many, possibly, but again we have physical constraints in terms of woman's body or female's body, so that could be the limiting factor. And also in terms of development and nourishment of that new embryo, that is another major constraint, because not all these octuplet, that is the 8 babies, will be healthy and will get nourishment. So maximum number theoretically can be anything. Practically there are quite a few limitations. Even with those triplets, that itself is a difficult stage. So imagine octuplet or something higher than that, the female would be dead for sure. So it's a, like I said, like theoretically it will be quite possible in terms of numbers, but practically there is quite a big limitation. If you I assume that you would have seen a tummy of a pregnant woman somewhere sometime. One child, like a female carrying one child itself, the whole of the abdominal area is swollen. With twins, it is completely tight. Triplet, it is on the edge as in like it feels like it's about to burst. It's like that. Imagine the pressure on that whole of the uterus with 3 babies growing inside. So higher number, sure.
Born prematurely then.
Sorry.
It'll have to be taken out prematurely, otherwise it'll burst or something.
Yeah, in some cases that does happen. But anything beyond 3 is practically like quite difficult yet dangerous. So yeah, so that is the 1 plus 3, those polar bodies. Size of the gamete, sperms, they are much smaller. They are hardly few micrometers. And ova, they are almost of 100 micrometer in size. So there is a drastic difference, almost of 10 times of the size in terms of sperm and ova that is produced. In terms of timings, spermatogenesis is a constant or continuous and uninterrupted process, while oogenesis is in arrested stages, that is from developmental embryo stage to puberty stage, puberty to fertilization stage, and after fertilization. So there are like these different stages. Not that after fertilization oogenesis happens, but after fertilization that complete maturation of the ova happens. So that's how it is different. Onset begins at puberty, and in case of oogenesis, it begins at fetal development, that is called as prenatal period. Prenatancy, that is before the delivery. Postnatancy, that is after the delivery. Release, spermatozoas, they are continuously released, and in case of oogenesis or ova, they are monthly released from puberty during each menstrual cycle. End lifelong, but reduces with the age, and the oogenesis, it actually terminates with the menopause, which is somewhere around 45 to 50 years of the age. Again, it differs from individual to individual, but on an average, we can say it is 48 to 50 years of the age. Like the puberty time, I had mentioned that it is decreasing over the time. The males as well as female, they are getting puberty at earlier ages. Similarly, the menopause is also coming down. Earlier it was 50 or so, Now it is coming down towards 48, 45 and so. So it has something to do with the lifestyle that we are having. So these are the in general differences between spermatogenesis and oogenesis. And that with this actually we finish whole of the reproductive structures, whole of the gamete formation process and so on. Now we'll look at the menstrual cycle and then fertilization and then the development later. So starting with the menstrual cycle, again most of these things you would have already learned in class 10, I suppose. And I don't know what was the depth there, but we will be looking at a little more depth in terms of hormonal control and so on as well. So this will surely be a new thing for you. So the reproductive cycle in female primates. Now this is not only the human female, but of the whole of the primate species is called as menstrual cycle. So I was just reading out few articles. How does it happen in dog or cat or any other animal species, and why don't we see their menstrual fluid at any time point? So, and how do we even know that a particular animal is going through a menstruation? So what I got to know was in those animals, they have different layers of the endometrium. Process remains same. Like there will be some menstruation days, then when the endometrium grows, then the ovulation happens, and so overall that process which we will see further remains same. But it's just that endometrium, whichever is going to get removed or scraped at the in the menstrual phase, that is the secretory phase, or when the endometrium is going to go out of the body, in case like how it happens in case of human female. In those cases, that does not go out of the body, but rather it gets reabsorbed into their own body. Like again, I don't know how does it happen exactly, but I can imagine those cells getting reabsorbed into the whole of the reproductive structure and broken down into the several components of it. So that is quite possible that it happens in that way in case of most of the animals. And how do we identify that a particular, let's say, cat or dog is like through menstrual cycle? Usually they reach puberty after 6 months, whether it's a cat or a dog, depend on which breed it is. On an average, 6 months is the time from the birth that they attain their puberty, and after puberty they start their menstruation cycle. So as and when their vulva structure, which is externally visible in case of cat as well as a female dog, so in both those cases the vulva structure is kind of swollen during this menstrual phase, and that is one of the identification character. And of course there are certain behavioral traits, but yeah, we need not go into those details as of now, but just to let you know that it does happen in all those animals as well, just we are not aware of them. So in human female, the sexual cycle begins when a girl attains puberty, that is usually like 11 to 13 years of the age. Menstruation is repeated at an average interval of 28 or 29 days. That's an average cycle. Though again it depends on woman to woman. In some women it might go to 25 days, that is lower, and in some it might go a little higher, but that is because of the menstruation phase is different. The rest of the phases, they remain more or less constant. In the middle of each cycle, that is 14th day, that is actually a kind of a D-day for the fertilization process. Like that is one of the most important day, where one ovum is released from either of the two ovaries. Again, this is one of the important fact. Not both the ovaries will release one ovum each. Otherwise, there is again a possibility of fraternal twins. But it is only one ovum is released from either left or right ovary. Then the cycle of events starting from one menstruation to the next, that is what is known as menstrual cycle, divided into 4 phases. Menstrual phase follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and the luteal or secretory phase. Now, usually the misconception is menstrual phase is at the end. And because it's a cycle, you can also consider that as an end, and it starts with follicular phase. But we will be starting with menstrual phase and so on. Again, you can use some of the like terminology or analogy to remember this MFOL, whatever way you want to remember it. But menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, and the luteal or secretory phase. Now, looking at the first phase, it marks the beginning and it is characterized by the menstrual flow. Now, if again, like I said, if it is, we want to consider follicular phase as the first, then this won't be the beginning, of course. But in general biological consensus, we consider this as the first phase, and it is characterized by the menstrual flow, which lasts for 3 to 5 days. In some of the cases, it might last up to 7 days. In some of the cases, it is just 3 days. So that just depends sometimes how much of the flow of the menstrual fluid, how long, that is very individualistic thing. Menstrual flow occurs due to the breakdown of the endometrial lining. We will see what this endometrium is. It is the innermost lining of the uterus, and it grows over time of the menstrual cycle, and during the menstrual phase, it will be broken down into several of the component tissues, and it will flow out of the body. And along with its blood vessels, because it is the nourishment tissue which is going to receive the fertilized zygote, so it has to have blood vessels. So along with all of that, it is broken. Menstrual fluid contains blood from these blood vessels, cells of the endometrial lining, that is from the endometrium region, and the unfertilized worm, whichever is secreted by the ovary. These three things, they are there in the menstrual fluid. Menstruation occurs only if released ovum is not fertilized. Now, again, I assume you know this fact that if the menstrual cycle has stopped, it is indication of either there is a malfunction in the body, or second reason is either the woman is pregnant. So during the pregnancy, that is when the ovum is fertilized, the menstruation stopped. And if the menstruation is continuous, that means the ovums, they are not fertilized throughout these cycles. Failure of menstruation indicates pregnancy, but it could be due to mental and physical stress or poor health. Like I said, there can be various other reasons apart from certain malfunctions of the body, which might indicate the failure of menstruation, and not always pregnancy is the reason. So that is first phase. In second phase, that is the follicular phase, it is also called as proliferative phase, specifically because the endometrium, it starts proliferating, that is growing. So it extends from the 6th day to 13th day. So from 1st to 5th day of the menstrual cycle, that is the menstrual phase. From 6th to 13th, that is almost the number of days are 8, and 8 or 9. I don't know. Yeah, I guess 9. So those days, they are of the second phase, that is follicular phase. Now, primary follicle in the ovary grows into a fully mature Graafian follicle. Now, again, this will overlap with the maturation or oogenesis process. So the primary follicle, which was still there in the multiplication phase, which was present in the ovary, will grow into fully mature Graafian follicle, that is secondary, tertiary, and then the Graafian follicle. The endometrium of that means like around the 13th day, your Graafian follicle would be ready. Yeah, from 6th day, it might be still in the primary follicle. Let's say around 8th day, it might be in secondary follicle, and so on. So that's a gradual process. From 6th to 13th, you will at the end have Graafian follicle. Endometrium of the uterine wall regenerates. regenerate, that means it starts forming again. The ruptured blood vessel, that is from the earlier menstrual cycle, those blood vessels will be ruptured. They are also repaired. The endometrium and its uterine glands. Now, endometrium has certain glands in it, which are responsible for secreting certain hormones and certain secretions, especially during the pregnancy. So we'll see that later in the pregnancy stage. But those endometrial tissues, as well as those uterine glands, they grow by tissue proliferation. That is what is the growth of the tissue. Hence, it is also called as proliferative phase apart from the follicular phase. The changes, they are controlled by estrogen. Estrogen is secreted by the follicular cells of the ova, if you remember that. So, these changes, they are controlled by estrogens secreted by the ovary and the follicle cells of maturing Graafian follicle. Now, the level of estrogen is maximum during the follicular phase. That means from 6th to 13th day, it will be maximum compared to the other phases, and is maintained by follicle stimulating hormone. That is FSH is secreted by the anterior pituitary, and that will maintain the level of estrogen. We will see this hormonal control in the last slide of this menstrual cycle. So this fact will get more clarity. By the end of this follicular phase, the endometrium becomes 2 to 3 mm thick. Now, one of the most important thing here is sometimes those women who bleed heavily, that means their menstruation is heavy menstruation. Again, there are two different types, like heavy menstruation and light menstruation. That means heavy menstruation refers to there is too much of blood flow, and that is because of the endometrium is thicker than this. That is, normally it is 2 to 3 mm thick. In case of heavy bleeding females, it can be up to 4 to 5 mm thick. And if it is higher than that, and if it is regular, that means we should consult a doctor and try and identify a reason of why a particular female is undergoing a heavy bleeding. And most of the reasons are hormonal, because let's say a particular woman has polycystic ovary disease, which is commonly called as PCOD. That means there are many cysts in the ovaries. Ultimately, many cysts means many cells. Many cells means more of the hormone. More of the hormone means more of the growth of endometrium. Just a simple logistic. And that way endometrium grows higher. So during menstruation, it will cause heavy blood flow. So these are different diseases. Again, in one of the PCOD type, it can completely block the menstruation. That means more PCOD, more cyst, it block the growth of certain cells, especially the follicular cells. So no hormone, and ultimately menstruation stops. So there are different situations based on which hormone at what level is being secreted, depending on that. But in general, if at all certain female is undergoing heavy bleeding or even very less bleeding, both of these are equal concern. So in general, endometrium grows up to 2 to 3 mm in thickness, and the endometrium glands become coiled and corkscrew shaped. Now, there are structural requirements of why this has to be like this, just to secrete hormones in a certain fashion, right? Again, we need not go into details, and you can just scrap this structure, but you can simply say the endometrium glands, they also proliferate along with the endometrial tissue up to 2 to 3 mm thickness. The arterioles in uterine wall also grow longer. Now, arterioles will grow in uterine or the layers of the uterus, specifically endometrium, because they have to supply all the tissues which are growing in 2 to 3 mm thickness. So obviously they will also have to grow longer and become branched, making endometrium highly vascular. because endometrium is one of the most important tissue to receive the zygote that is fertilized, and that is why it has to provide sufficient nutrition. So sufficient blood has to be there, and that's why highly vascular. So that is the follicular phase. Now, like I said, the most important day is the ovulation day. That is usually happens on the 14th day in the ovulatory phase. Now, the luteinizing hormone, that is LH and FSH, we will see these hormones in in the hormonal control of the menstrual cycle. But here I will just mention in brief. So this luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, these levels, they will be at peak on 14th day of the menstrual cycle, of course. The maximum level of LH during the mid cycle is called as LH surge, that is luteinizing hormone surge. Obviously, surge, surge means there is quite a lot of it. So on 14th day, that will be at its peak. That's why it is called as LH surge. The major function of this LH is to induce the rupture of the Graafian follicle and release the ovum. Now, we had seen how a Graafian follicle will look like. Graafian follicle will have that secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte over the from the same day, it will finish all of the meiosis 2 process, that is complete meiosis division, and it will be not meiosis 2 completely, but up to the metaphase 2 stage, and then it will go into the fallopian tube on the 14th day. So that is the inducing rupture of the Graafian follicle and release of the ovum. Remember, ovum does not mean the final ovum here, but it is still at the premature stage of the meiosis 2, like we had seen in case of oogenesis. So that is the ovulatory phase. Then in fourth phase, that is luteal phase, or also called as secretory phase. The period that follows ovulation or ovulatory phase is luteal phase. Now the cells of this ruptured Graafian follicle, that is those granulosa cells or follicular cells, they enlarge and form a golden colored corpus luteum. We had seen this back then also. So it will form corpus luteum on the surface of the ovary. It grows about 7 days. Now from 14th day, that is from 15th day to the cycle ending, that is 28th day, that is the time frame of this phase. So in the first 7 days, starting from 15th day, the corpus luteum will be formed and it will keep growing and is responsible for secretion of the progesterone. Now, if at all the ovum is fertilized on the 14th day in the ovulatory phase, this progesterone will help in maintenance of the pregnancy. Yeah, that is why the corpus luteum structure is very important. And the level of progesterone is controlled by the luteinizing hormone. So the function of luteinizing hormone, first is to rupture this Graafian follicle, and second is to maintain the corpus luteum so that it will keep secreting progesterone throughout the pregnancy. Not throughout the pregnancy, but at least in first phase of pregnancy, and then it takes over by different hormone altogether. So that is the luteal phase up till here. If the ovum is not fertilized, that means if the ova, whichever is released, doesn't come in contact with sperm, the corpus luteum will degenerate into white mass. So that means up to 7 days, it will maintain the progesterone. It will see if there is a fertilized egg. The maintained progesterone level will stay as it is. And if it is not fertilized, then progesterone level will go down and the corpus luteum will degenerate into white mass, which is corpus albicans, and it will lower the progesterone level in the blood again. Obviously, corpus luteum is going to degenerate. So whatever progesterone it was synthesizing will also go down in terms of its level. So that is the luteal phase, or also called as secretory phase. Now, if the egg is fertilized. Now this was the situation. This was the situation we are talking of if the egg is not fertilized. Now if the egg is fertilized, what is the course of action that happens after the menstrual cycle? Now if the egg is fertilized, progesterone prepares the uterus for anticipated pregnancy. That means progesterone and the cells of the uterus realizes that there is a fertilized zygote, and they will prepare for the pregnancy period. The uterine endometrium thickens further. Now it will thicken even after. So first during menstruation, during proliferative phase, it thickens 2 to 3 mm. Now the moment it realizes that zygote has the egg has fertilized into zygote, it will thicken even further up to 4 to 5 mm. Now, and the uterine glands increase, become more corkscrew shape. Again, this has something to do with the more secretion. So uterine glands also proliferate along with the endometrial lining. These things, they begin, these things as it, the uterine gland and the endometrium begins to secrete fluid in the uterus. Now this fluid is kind of nourishing for the dividing egg. Dividing egg as in the egg or the zygote, which is undergoing the mitosis process. That is the dividing egg. The uterus is ready for implantation of the embryo. And because of the thickened endometrium along with all those uterine gland plus the nourishing fluid, the endometrium or the uterus is completely ready for the implantation. Implantation is nothing but attachment of the embryo to the uterine walls or the endometrial wall. Then the progesterone also inhibits the further follicular maturation. Now if the egg is fertilized, corpus luteum is maintained, so progesterone level is maintained, and this progesterone level will in turn stop the follicle stimulating hormone, and it will stop the follicular maturation for the rest of the pregnancy period. So that is kind of negative feedback mechanism, that higher level of progesterone maintained for a longer time. It gives a signal to the body that we do not need a follicle at this moment, that is Graafian follicle release at every month. Otherwise, imagine pregnancy is happening and ovaries are secreting the ovum every month. That should not happen. There, what happens is, like, it does not happen. This is a hypothetical situation, but imagine embryo is growing up to 1 month and the menstrual cycle is also going to happen. Then in that case, the chances of abortion is higher. So that's when the hormones, they take care of this particular phase of the pregnancy. So higher level of progesterone, they will maintain or they will inhibit the follicular maturation and ultimately release of that next ovum. It will not allow it to happen. This is called as luteal phase because the corpus luteum is formed and is functional only during its phase. Luteum and luteal, and that's why it is called as luteal phase, because corpus luteum is only formed in this stage and is active. It is also called progesterone phase because the progesterone level is highest during this phase. In the first phase, estrogen level was highest. In the second stage, FSH and LH were at its peak, that is in the ovulation. And in the last phase, progesterone is at higher level. And again, I hope you remember the reason now, to maintain the pregnancy. And it is also called secretory phase because during this phase, uterine walls, they secrete some nutritious fluid in the uterus. And like, again, this is in case if the egg is fertilized. If it is not fertilized, there will not be this nutritious fluid in the uterus. Only in case of fertilization happening, this will be there. The duration of this phase is lasting from 15 to 28 days, and if the pregnancy is continued, this process continues as usual, and if not, then it goes back to the menstrual phase. Okay, we'll just have a look at this diagram and then I will take any questions if you have at all. So if you look at the first cycle. I hope this is visible, and this my whatever this sidebar is not affecting the view. Okay, let me bring it down in any which case. So if you look at the topmost part, which says ovarian cycle, and that shows the growth of the follicle up to the end. And if you look at the 14th day, ovulation has happened. Before the ovulation has to happen, the Graafian follicle has to be ready. Otherwise, these will be in the primary and secondary follicle stage, right? I hope you have understood that. That is what is shown here as growing follicle. This will be Graafian follicle. This will be release of the ovum on the 14th day. After release, these cells will form a corpus luteum, that is in the luteal phase, and then at the end it will form the corpus albicans. Now if there is corpus albicans formation, usually it starts somewhere around 27th or 28th day, and if there is no progesterone, then obviously the female will enter into the menses, otherwise it will continue with the pregnancy. Then in the second like graph which is being shown, body temperature. Body temperature is normal up to the ovulation. At the ovulation, the body temperature is slightly increased. I don't remember the exact figure, but I guess it's few degree Fahrenheit that it increases, and body just become warm. Also, there was one very interesting study. I was reading about this in general, that female become more beautiful in terms of their appearance on this particular day, ovulation day. I don't know, it has to do something with the hormones, and for me it was kind of funny also to read it, but that was scientifically proven. So I was reading it with lot of interest. I'll share that article if I find it again. But yeah, so the temperature increases on the 14th day, and it is maintained up to the almost 25th of the day of the menstrual cycle, and then it slowly start decreasing up to 28 days, and then again it goes back to the normal during menses, and then it continues further. So luteal phase, from ovulation phase, the temperature of the body is also little higher. Yeah, little higher doesn't mean 1 or 2 degrees centigrade higher. It is just a little warmer than the normal one. And if you look at the anterior pituitary hormone, that is the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, as it is being said, they will slowly start secreting. Now, follicle stimulating hormone that is shown in blue, it is higher here because it is responsible for maturation of the Graafian follicle compared to luteinizing hormone. So it goes a little higher. From the start itself, it is slowly increasing, and then as soon as the ovule is released, it will be at its peak, and then it will again fall down. And same is the case with the luteinizing hormone. This will be at its peak, and it will be responsible for maintaining the progesterone level, like from here, because it is responsible for formation of corpus luteum. So as and when this is higher, it will ensure that corpus luteum is formed, and then it is going down further. The fourth graph that we see here is ovarian hormones. Now that is, yes.
So could you repeat what's the function? Why does the luteinizing hormone peak on the ovulation day?
Why does the luteinizing hormone?
So what's the function of luteinizing hormone?
Luteinizing hormone functions to maintain the corpus luteum structure. Ultimately, it maintains the progesterone level. So after this rupture of the follicle, this Graafian follicle, or let's say ovarian follicle, this develops into corpus luteum, right? That is after 14th day itself. And that structure to convert into corpus luteum, luteinizing hormone plays a role, and that is why it is at its peak. It will maintain, it will form, like all of the luteinizing hormone that is formed on 14th day will make sure that corpus luteum is formed. As soon as it is formed, the luteinizing hormone levels will go down. Now it doesn't match with the graph as such. Ideally it should be shown here, but because they can't show corpus luteum structure here itself, that is why this gap. But otherwise, corpus luteum will start forming from the 15th day itself, which is right next to 14th. Yeah, that's just a diagrammatic representation part.
Got it.
So the next graph that is being shown is the ovarian hormones, that is estrogens and the progesterone. And estrogens is a group of hormone. In that, one of them is estradiol, which is one of the important estrogen. There is like, I don't know, I don't remember exactly what are those different estrogens, but I will get back to you on that. I can't recollect. So one of them, one of the estrogens is estradiol, which is shown here as E2 as well. So during the first follicular phase, or the where the follicle is maturing, it is required for growth of the Graafian follicle. So that's why it is at its peak. On 14th day, the estradiol level will suddenly drop down, and again it will increase because this structure, estrogen structure, is involved in the other functions of the uterus. We will see all those functions here. I will not complicate it, but let's say one important function of estrogen is to help in the formation of the follicle. So that is why after the formation of the follicle, it goes down, and then again later it increases. We'll see why does it increase again. But progesterone, it is at minimal level, and after the corpus luteum has formed after 14th day, it will be at its highest during the luteal phase, and that's why it is the corpus luteum and the luteal phase where the progesterone level is higher. If the pregnancy is continued, it will be maintained at a certain level. If the pregnancy is not continued, that is when ovum is not fertilized, it will go back to its basal level. Yeah, so that is the progesterone. And this diagram is just showing you how the uterine endometrium like looks like during these phases. So during the menses, obviously it is going to get broken down, including this red thing that is blood vessels or arterioles, and they will be broken down as well. So this will be the regular thickness of your endometrium. Then during these ovulation menstrual cycle phases, this will keep growing. If the pregnancy is what you say, if the egg is fertilized, it will grow further. If it is not fertilized, then it will be at the same level, and then it will again go back to the menses, that is menstrual phase. So what they are showing here in terms of growth is not the complete growth in case of menstrual cycle only, but what they are trying to indicate here is the pregnancy phase as well. So this is the complete diagram and the graphical representation of the menstrual cycle. Okay, do you have any question? And I have one more diagram which again shows the same thing, just the number of days they are mentioned in a better way. That's it, nothing different. And one of the thing that you should see here is now these would be LH and FSH. Again, you might see this difference in the level. So there are so many of these parameters which I actually should see. But yeah, looking at the scope of the syllabus, we will not look into those minute details. Otherwise, there is a slight increase in the LH and FSH level during the pregnancy, and what does it do, that we should have studied actually. Okay, I guess the time is up. So we'll start this hormonal control in the next class. If you have any question, you can ask. One of the things that I haven't mentioned, and it is not again a part of the syllabus, is there is something called as human chorionic gonadotropin. It is called HCG, small h, capital C, capital G, HCG. That is one of the hormone which is secreted by the placenta when the egg is fertilized and pregnancy is maintained, and that takes over the function of progesterone. So progesterone level after a while, when the corpus luteum is obviously not going to stay throughout the pregnancy. So progesterone level will also not be stay same throughout the pregnancy. At some time point, it will corpus luteum will degrade, progesterone level will come down, but then that will affect the pregnancy. So body has another hormone, that is HCG, which takes over the function of progesterone, and then it continues the pregnancy. So that's how all of these functions.
So
Yes.
so alternatively, the both ovaries they release the ova, right?
Yeah.
So if one ovary is removed, then the menstruation will only happen once in 2 months.
Then the body will start sending signal to the other ovary, and it will start secreting the ovule every month. It is not it's like you cut out one path and then the other path will happen alternatively. No, that is not the way. It's the what you say, it's always getting communicated to each ovaries which one will secrete at this time. So let's say even if you block one of the ovary, this ovary will get communication every time. So instead of getting the signal getting distributed to either one, either left or right, it will get distributed to only one side. So that statement is not true then.
Sir, does this only happen in mammals?
As in what?
Menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So is it because no other animal gives birth?
Because no other animal
Gives birth, like
yeah.
life.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, what is the point of menstrual cycle altogether?
So like when the egg is forming, so some give eggs, right? Like birds and all. So they might also have some kind of cycle like this, right? Or is just the egg is randomly formed?
There is a cycle, but it's not a menstrual cycle as such. It's a totally different process altogether. See, it's like so there are again two processes of fertilization. In some cases, animals are hermaphrodite. That means they can internally fertilize their own egg, or if at all the copulation is required, for example, in case of birds, that is the sexual intercourse. If at all that is required, in that case, that is the external fertilization. So depends on which method, but otherwise the process of generating like oogenesis process, if we can call it collectively, it is almost similar. Just stages would be different. The egg yolk will be little bigger compared to how we have. So those structural differences will remain, but in general, if you look at the like wider perspective of the oogenesis, that is same. Because ultimately it is again, remember it, this is all part of the evolution process.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so shall we stop here, people? Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and I will see. Oh, one thing I want to ask before I forget it. On Monday, you do not have any class from 2:30 to 3:30. Am I right? I just had a look at your timetable.
So we never have classes after 2:30.
So, oh, you never have classes after 2:30.
You're talking about 1:30 to 2:30.
Yeah, 1:30 to 2:30.
Yeah, we
So
don't
we have art class.
Oh, yeah, they have art.
Do you have art?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I was thinking if we take one class extra, we will go a little faster. And also because like now we are 1 week behind compared to the term plan that I had shared. And I guess it's because we have been going into too much of details, and I feel it is important also. So maybe for this chapter we will see, but we are 1 week behind the schedule, and if we can somehow compensate it. So yeah.
I think there's one free slot on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturdays we only have till 1:30, including art.
But then Saturday, you have 2 classes in the morning, right?
2 classes in the morning, then art, and it ends. That ends at 1:30, and then after that we don't have anything.
No, actually, art does not happen on Saturday. It's been cancelled because of the clubs.
Oh,
Yeah, clubs happen at 11:30 to 12:30 if you are part of it.
so what Akshay is saying is that the 1:30 to 2:30 slot is free. We usually have class at that time.
Right, but then would you want to do a class on Saturday at 1:30 to 2:30? That is another question. I would keep it like a weekend and then you have chilled weekend. That's when I was thinking of having it one of the days, especially Monday, because Monday we do not have class.
No, so I think it's quite the opposite. I think on Monday you need to relax more because if you have all classes on Monday, then people lose motivation to study.
What do you, Akshay and Mansi, think? What do you think?
Yeah, same. I mean, yeah, we can do it on Saturday.
So Saturday 1:30 to 2:30?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will just post it in Google Classroom so that others will also know it.
Sir. So like if none of us go into any clubs, which I'm sure most of us don't, why don't we do it from
11,
like
12.
yeah.
I am okay. I am happy to do it.
You can just ask. You can just put it on the Google Classroom, saying any time between here and here. If you have clubs, then just tell me. If you don't have clubs, then we can have it earlier.
I mean, you can just send the recorded one to the people who have clubs.
That is also a possible option. I would prefer it because I see only 3 of you have been constantly attending classes. And the rest 3, they are just intermittently coming. I need to speak to them about that.
Oh, I think someone else also came today.
Yeah,
Girija,
Pranav,
I think.